slide, yeah?
All right, okay.
Okay, let's take a look at the features of good research framework. So all of you, dear student, you need to understand the features of good research framework, meaning to say, how can you have a good research framework that able to guide your research and at the end of the day, all right, able to help you to answer all your research objective. Okay, so number one, all right, it must reflect the study. All right, so research framework should reflect the study. Meaning to say, if you are doing on certain areas, all right, all the variables must appear or must reflect in your research framework. All right. I come across one thesis, I think last 2 years, a thesis from Tanzania. All right. The student wanted to do study on OSHA, occupational safety and health, right? And he wanted to know to what extent OSHA is being practiced in the oil and gas company, all right? But I find out that the research framework, all right, is somehow not reflect about OSHA as well as oil and gas company. And then I found out that, you know, the research framework is taken and it talking about the satisfaction. I was like, what happened to this research framework? All right. So when I highlighted this, and then it's also supported by other examiners. So when we asked question to the candidate, so he admitted that he copied someone's research framework and adjust here and there, and he probably forgot to change some of the terms. All right. So don't get caught red-handed, and you have to make sure that your research framework reflect your study. And then second one, it must be appropriate with the level of study or master or PhD. All right. I come across this issue. What does it mean with a study that appropriate for master and PhD? All right. And we discussed this quite lengthy when I did my PhD, among my friends, among my supervisors, and also among students in the research methodology class. So the lecturer told us that for master, ideally, all right, the objective or the research question is between 3 to 4, right? Basically 3. 3 is, I think, is appropriate for master level. I'm talking about your research questions and your research objective, yeah? And then for PhD, it's between 4 to 5, all right? But usually, I always take a safe side. PhD always 5 and above, all right? Between 5 to 6, yeah? So not more than that. Because I told my students, you are not solving the word problem, you are solving this particular problem, and you have to be in depth in your study, all right? So your research framework should somehow help you to discover what are the possible answers to your problems, yeah? And then it derived from an extensive and critical and analytical review of literature, all right? So all of you need to understand that research framework, all right, is a framework that you develop and it derived from an extensive literature review. All right. So my experience as the examiner, I find out that many students, all right, they did poorly in their literature review. They are merely reporting, so and so says this, so and so did this, but where is the analysis? Because, you know, there are a number of research that always contradicted to each other. A, B, and C says these are the factors that lead toward this. D, E, and F says the other way around. So their findings say that these factors are not significant. But why, you know, these results are not coherent to each other? You should be able to have your own thoughts in the literature review. All right. So not only reporting, but also looking at what are the gaps that you can highlight. Also discussing what are the loopholes that are not covered in those studies, and you need to report in your literature review. Then only you can say that, you know, your research framework is robust because you have done a thorough literature review. Yeah, I still remember when I did my PhD, my supervisor rejected my chapter 2, I think more than 3 times. Reject, because Fadila, why are you doing this? You are reporting. You just say that so and so did this, so and so do that. And what is your own school? What is your own thought about this? What is your view about this? I was like, how do I do that? You know, so he taught me about how to do a good literature review. And I'm telling you, dear student, chapter 2 or literature review chapter is not an easy chapter. Yeah. But if you are doing literature review thoroughly, it will give you full advantage in your chapter 5. All right, when you already got your finding, this is whereby you need to start to discuss about your findings. Why your finding not similar to the previous study, or how your findings similar, but the impact is not great as compared to the previous study. Right? I still remember when I did my PhD, I have about 40 hypotheses. 40 hypotheses, and half of my hypotheses are not supported. Meaning to say, the findings that I got different from the past studies. So I was like, what happened to my findings? And I have this mental block for about 2 weeks. I couldn't write. I don't know what to do. I feel lost. I feel frustrated. And then I met my supervisor. My supervisor, Fadila, that is good. I would say, what do you mean by that is good? My finding not supported with the previous study. How does it good for me? This is the breakthrough for your study. So this is whereby you need to challenge the previous studies. So that's very interesting journey of my PhD. Yeah? And then the next features of good research framework is it guide how the research is to be carried out. So research framework is actually helping you to do the scoping, all right? Meaning to say there are so many problems, there are so many factors, but you're only interested in looking in these factors. Other than that, you are not interested. So if people ask you, in the people always ask you, there are other factors that influence your dependent variable, for instance. Yeah, why your study did not focus on those variables. Right? How can you safeguard yourself? You may say that, yes, I agree that there are other factors that contributes towards this issue, but my study only looking into this area. But you have to justify clearly why, right? And then the next one is based on the gap of study identified in the problem statement. You have to understand that your research framework is the reflections of your research framework is the reflections of your problem statement. What are the problem that you have highlighted should somehow reflect in your research framework. All right. In your problem statement, you have highlighted what are the problems in the area of study. All right, and you take into account this problem, all right, and reflect that in your research framework. You see, so the problem statement have a strong connotation with your research question and research objective, as well as your conceptual framework or research framework, whatever name you call it. All right, so being the examiner, all right, I always look at this coherence of idea, where the problem statement is actually reflected in in research question, research objective, and also research framework. All right. Sometimes the student did not explain clearly in the problem statement, and suddenly it appeared in the research framework. So this is whereby student get caught. All right. In your research framework, you have highlighted these factors, but why these factors are not discussed in your problem statement? All right. Where these factors come from, right? When look at the literature review, this is whereby the student get caught that the literature review is just merely reporting, right? And then the next one is research framework should be supported by extensive and in-depth of LR works, all right? You may ask me questions. To what extent the literature review is considered extensive and in-depth? Based on my experience when I did my PhD, I think I read nearly or maybe more then 1,000 articles, books, website, yeah. And my list of references alone, I think more than 60 pages. My thesis about 500 pages. My list of reference alone is more than 60. I read a lot. That's why I say I understand if you claim that you get lost in your reading. I don't understand because I read a lot. But what saved me is the metadata that I explained to you just now. Yeah? And the last features of good research framework is it should be supported by and explained well by theory or established models. All right. So when you develop your research framework, all right, this research framework is actually basically explain about the possible relationship between these factors towards other factors, all right? We call it these independent variables and dependent variables, all right? And how to make sure that there is a possible relationship that occur between this. This is whereby all these need to be supported by relevant theories, all right? So choosing the right theories is very, very important, all right? Okay, let's take a look at the contribution of theory to the research. Yeah? What is theory? Theory basically a set of interrelated concepts, definitions, and propositions that are advanced to explain and predict phenomenon of study. All right. Later, I'm going to share with you a study done by my student. All right, on medical tourism. All right. So actually, it's based on our FRGS grant. So we hired the student to be our researcher and said, oh, "Are you interested to do research on this?" So she said, "Okay, interested." All right. So when she read doing the literature review, so she said that this medical tourism is a trend, and Malaysia is regarded as one of the best destinations of medical tourism. And I said that, prove it. When you say that Malaysia is one of the best destination for medical tourism, prove it. All right. So how you prove it? Theory can explain on how you prove that phenomenon. Right. So the purpose of theory is to explain the cause and effect and why a certain relationship exists. So that is a theory, because theory explains why certain phenomena occur. Yeah. The next one is theories explain or support phenomenon of study. For example, like if you are doing on child abuse, why certain pedophile, for example, react this way or have that kind of behaviors. All right. So theory can actually help you to explain why certain behaviors is there among the pedophile. You've heard much pedophile. All right. The next one is to form a basis for hypothesis development. All right. Theory can also help you to form your hypothesis. And last but not least, theories function as a bridge between IVs and DVs. So if you wanted to support the possible relationship that might occur between your independent variable and dependent variable, all right, the right theory could actually explain. For example, like you wanted to know what make people motivates to do something, all right? So when we talk about what motivates to do something, so you usually refer to the theory of motivation, right? All right. Or you wanted to know why people behave certain ways and what actually dictate those behaviors. So you may use the theory of planned behavior or the theory of reason action, and in order for you to explain why this behavior exists. Yeah. Now let's take a look at the placement of theory in quantitative research study. All right. One uses theory deductively and places it at the beginning of the study. All right. So when you are doing quantitative study, in order for you to explain the possible relationship that might occur between your variables, all right, this is whereby this theory you explain at the beginning of your study normally in chapter 2. All right. If you are conducting qualitative study, all right, I've seen through several qualitative study. Usually the theory comes first during the first chapter. The theory already being discussed. Right. So the objective is to test or verify the theory rather than developing a theory. All right. So basically, in the quantitative study, right, the theory is used, all right, to test whether it is correct or not. For example, like the theory of planned behavior. Past studies say that these are the findings. And you take that theory to explain your research framework, all right, whether the same observation similar with the past studies. All right. So this is whereby the theory here you need to test. Okay, and it explains and predict the probable relationship between IVs and DV, as I mentioned to you just now. All right, so what you need to do if you are doing quantitative study, number one, you need to identify the theory for the study. All right, and I'm telling you that to identify the right theory is not an easy task also, because there are a number of theories, there are thousands of theories. But which of the theories that is very relevant to your study? This is whereby you need to review number of theories. When I did my PhD, when my supervisor said, "Okay, Fadilah, prove your claim," all right. And then I reviewed. I think I reviewed about 10 theories, and then I reviewed, meaning to say, in my chapter 2. All right, I reviewed all this theory, the origin of the theory, the development of the theory, what is the what do you call it, key findings in the theories and whatnot. And then after review 10 theories, all right, therefore I decided, okay, my research framework can be supported by these 5 theories. Oh yes, I used 5 theories in my study, because the nature of my research, I'm combining between 2 different disciplines, human resource discipline as well as strategy and also knowledge management. You have about 3 interrelated disciplines, and then because of the complexity of the research framework, one single theory cannot help me to explain the relationship. So I have to rely on 5 base theory, and this theory I reviewed thoroughly, and I also published papers on the theory that I reviewed. Yeah? And then you have to discard the theory. When you discard the theory, you have to dig, the origin of the theory. All right. For example, like if your theory use the Friedrich Herzberg theory, all right, you need to get, if possible, the Friedrich Herzberg theory wrote by him. All right. And then you have to identify and you have to understand what is the origin of this theory, why this theory come into picture, why Friedrich Herzberg introduced this theory, and how this theory evolved. All right, because many researchers also use the theory, and they how to say that, they modify the theory, and you have to report all this development. All right. And then you have to describe the use of the theory, how the theory is useful for your study, how this theory help you to justify your research framework. All right. And then apply the concept or the proposition of the theory in your study, right, in the form of hypothesis. All right. And then conclude with if then logic to relate the IVs to the DV. I'm sure that your supervisor can help you on this. But basically, if you are using theory in quantitative study, all right, these are the things that you need to know. Identify the right theory and describe the theory and explain how the theory is useful for your study. All right. Let's take a look at the placement of theory in qualitative research studies. All right. Some of you may opt to do quantitative studies. Some of you may opt to do qualitative study. So if you are doing qualitative study, you have to rely on the theory in order for you to explain the phenomena. All right. And later you need to confirm whether the theory is correct or not. All right. So when I did my PhD, my approach is a mixed method. I use both quantitative and qualitative, and I think I appreciate more qualitative after I finish my PhD, because to me, you may disagree with me, but I'm discuss this based on my experience. To me, qualitative study is very much interesting because you discover new things, all right? And qualitative study is very, very, what you call it, tedious to do, all right? When I say tedious, meaning to say you need to transcribe all the respondents' feedback verbatimly, all right? Okay, and it depends how you transcribe that. If you are conducting interview, one informant took you 2 hours interview, then you're gonna have transcribe the interview, I think about 30 pages, right? I still remember I interviewed that particular informant 2 hours and 45 minutes. I end up about nearly 37 pages of transcription. Right? And you have to analyze all of this when you are doing qualitative. In fact, when you ask question, long pause also give you certain meaning. When the informant also represent certain meaning. Maybe the person reluctant, maybe the person do not know. You know, you have to interpret the meaning behind this and whatnot. Yeah. So qualitative study is not easy research. Yeah. You have to get a good guide, yeah, for you to do qualitative study. All right, so theory and qualitative study provide broad explanation for the phenomena to be studied and use the theoretical perspective to guide their study as to what are the important issues to be examined. I'm going to share with you how this theory help in the qualitative study in the next slides, based on the work done by my student already graduated in 2019. Yeah. All right, so skipping again the exercise because I don't think we have more times for us to discuss about this. I'm just straightforward discuss about the theory and concept. Yeah. So, what is theory and what is concept? What is the difference between theory and concept? Yeah? Theory basically a statement of a general principle or set of propositions. All right. The theory, the term used is propositions, yeah, which is based upon reason, argument, and supported by evidence that is intended to explain the particular fact, event, or phenomenon. So you have to understand, all dear student, that theory is basically based is a statement or a proposition derived from study that able to help why certain phenomena occur. For example, like you wanted to know what motivates people, right? So theory of motivation can actually explain. So this theory of motivation that introduced by different scholars is basically derived from their research, all right? It is not something that they think in their mind, but theory is actually finding that supported, not finding that supported, a statement that supported by evidence. In this case, findings lah. Right, and then it is part of a science and art that deals with general principles and method and is supported by evidence. All right, concept, on the other hand, is a general idea or meaning which is associated with word or symbol in a person's mind. Concepts are the abstract ideas inferred or derived from specific instances. All right, so concept is something that you say that this could be important, they're able to explain why certain phenomena occur. But you don't know whether this concept is actually true or not, whether this concept is actually accurate or not. You don't know yet. You only have this idea in your mind, all right? And yet you need to test this and get the finding to actually support whether the concept that you propose is correct. Yeah? It is more inclined towards introducing practical application that underline a set of rules or principles, and it is supported by hypothesis. Why hypothesis? Because you are not sure yet whether the concept that you have in mind can actually have an impact towards the phenomena. You don't know yet in mind. Therefore, you need to come up with the hypothesis, and the hypothesis need to be tested. All right. For example, like when I did my PhD, all right, I wanted to come up with human resource development framework, and how it can help to improve organizational performance. All right. In the context of human resource development, there are a number of factors that it contributes towards organizational performance. But my study, I only interested in CPD, continuous professional development. All right, so I only focus on that. Other factors, I'm not interested. All right, this is what we call it concept. You're only interested in this. Other than that, you're not interested. But whether it is workable, whether it is feasible, all right, in your study, you are not sure yet. Right. Therefore, to test whether your idea or your concept is actually work in your research, then you need to support this with hypothesis, and the hypothesis need to be tested. Yeah. All right, now move on to conceptual framework and also theoretical framework. So basically, conceptual framework is built around the linking or interrelatedness of the variables in the study in the absence of an established theory on the subject matter. When you develop your conceptual framework, basically you have the concept in your head that these are the possible factors that could have an impact towards this phenomena. All right, but these factors, you are not sure yet whether it is relevant, it is accurate or not. All right, and at that point of time, you don't even think about what are the theory that could explain this. Later, when you are doing your literature review, then only you find the established theory that could explain why certain variables or certain concept helps to give an impact towards the phenomena of study. In my study, all right, the concept that I use is derived from various elements, all right, and then that's why I use 5 theories, because I have 4 independent variables, I have 4 moderating variables, I have 1 mediating variables, and each of the variables that I use in my study is actually backed up by a theory. So that is why, you have to be very, very sure about which theory that relevant to your study. All right. Or where existing theory has failed to establish that link, it offers a model that demonstrates how the research inquiry is to be conducted logically. All right. So my students that do research on conceptual framework, the first question that I ask you, what are the possible variables that you think influence this phenomena? For example, like currently, my PhD student is doing on fire department. All right, he wanted to know whether age, right, is actually have an impact toward performance. All right, and the variables or the concept that he used is the work ability. All right, and this work ability is actually derived from a model. All right, developed by scholars overseas. All right. And then I said that, okay, why you use this model? All right, why you use the model? Because this is the model introduced. All right, so what is the unique of your study? If you are using people's model, this is PhD, yeah, I'm telling my student, this is PhD. If you are using the existing model, so what is so unique about your study? Oh, I'm adding new variables, new concept, because this concept, I believe that it will give an impact towards my dependent variables. But I'm not so sure yet whether it is relevant or not, because based on my reading, right, this variable is important but not yet tested. Okay, if that's the case, then you can use this, but you have to justify clearly with your literature review and whatnot. So that is conceptual framework. You have the concept, but the concept is not tested yet, and you don't even know what are the theory that might suitable. All right, and you have to review number of theory if you are not sure which theory to be used. All right. Theoretical framework, on the other hand, is founded on the theories, or a theoretical framework is founded on the theories already developed over an area over a long period of time, having a robust historical background, while the conceptual framework is used in a new researchable area. Theoretical framework is whereby you know the theory, but you wanted to know whether the theory is actually applicable or not in your research. All right. So you wanted to know whether the theory produce similar results or not. But conceptual framework is where you are not so sure whether this one is actually workable or not. It has to be tested. All right. And how can the concept be used in your study? This is whereby you need to find the relevant theory. Yeah. Okay. I also collect a number of differences between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. As per what you can see, I'm just going to describe one or two. All right, theoretical framework used to be based on the existing theory, duly tested and validated by other researchers. All right, we need to say theoretical framework. I have a student that using theory of motivation, and it tested whether the theory of motivation applicable to Gen Y. All right, my student did Gen Y on aviation industry. All right. So he used the theory of motivation by Friedrich Herzberg. But if you are familiar with the theory of motivation by Friedrich Herzberg, there are two ways, right? One is hygiene, one is motivator. But my student only wanted to know the motivator, not the hygiene. Meaning to say he wanted to know the inner part of the theory rather than the external part of the theory, and how does it explain the behavior of Gen Y in aviation industry, right? Already published the findings of the thesis, and I think about 30 over citations so far. All right. The research was published in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. All right. Conceptual framework, on the other hand, used to be grounded in the concept that provide for the main variables in a research inquiry. This is something the research scholar develop themselves based on the theory. This is the conceptual framework, right? So you know these are the theory, but you modify the theory and you introduce new concept, but you use the theory as the underpinning theory to explain whether the concept that you introduce is actually have the impact towards your phenomena. All right, so the phenomena here referring to your dependent variables. Yeah. So the rest I think you can read. I'm going to share this slide with you. I'm going to give this slide to Mr. Taufik. Right. And then let's take a look at the significant differences between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. You know, simplify the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework for easy understanding. Yeah, theoretical framework is very general as compared to conceptual framework, very specific. Why specific? Because you wanted to know specific variables or specific construct. All right. Other than that, you are not interested. That's why you say conceptual framework. You need to say what you have in mind. You wanted to know whether it is workable or not for your study. All right. And then theoretical framework contain theories from past study, theories from past study, in which conceptual framework it contain your vision or your concept. Okay. And then the functions of theoretical framework is to support concept used in the research, right? And conceptual framework, the function is to explain the research variables. Okay. For example, like if you wanted to know factors that lead towards job satisfaction, all right, from your past study, right, you managed to identify that past study indicate that factors that lead to job satisfaction, for example, wages, leadership, what else? Good relationship with colleague. What else? The work itself, the job that you're doing also can give you job satisfaction. All right. And you wanted to know, I think the policy in the organization also can have the impact toward job satisfaction. The policy in this case is the concept that you think, that you believe that you trust have the impact toward job satisfaction, but you are not sure yet whether the policy have similar impact as the first four that I mentioned to you just now. All right, that is the conceptual framework. And in order for you to test whether policy of the organization have an impact toward job satisfaction, this is whereby you need to find what are the relevant theory that could explain whether the policies actually can help to justify the job satisfaction. Yeah, so I do hope that my explanation you understand. Yeah, and then explain theoretical function to explain about the phenomenon. All right. And conceptual framework is a structure of what has been learned to best explain the natural progression of a phenomenon that is being studied. In the social science, in which human basically our research interest. So we study their behavior, we study their attitudes, we study their intention. You have to understand humans are very complicated, all right? So there are a number of factors that determine why they behave certain ways, all right? And this is whereby you, because we are studying human, all right, so this field is very dynamic because there are possible lot of other factors outside there that you can test, that you can discover, and it explain whether it has an impact towards why people behave certain ways, right? Unlike science and technology, right, they are using controlled environment or experiment and whatnot, put some light, what is the effect towards the plants, put some noise, what is the impact toward the plants and whatnot. So when we study human, all right, we study their behavior, all right. There are a number of factors that determine or that influence why people behave certain ways, all right. And you need to find out what are those factors. Apart of the factors that been listed by previous study, you may want to test new factors. All right, this could be the breakthrough in your study because you contribute to the body of knowledge in which this concept or factor is not been tested before. All right. Theoretical framework provide the researcher the lens to view the work. All right, this is talking about the ontology and epistemology. All right, conceptual framework on the other hand involve an exploration of relationship between two or more variables. And then in the conceptual framework, all right, the tenses that we use is more toward present tense or future tense. Why present tense and or future tense? Because this is the factor that we are not yet confirmed, right? And theoretical framework, the tenses that we use usually past tense or present tense. Why present tense? Because it's still going on, it's still being used. For example, like job satisfaction, you cannot deny. Wages is one of the factor, all right? Been confirmed before and still remain relevant until now, wages, all right? This is the factor that influence job satisfaction, all right?